Hi, my name's Tiny Haynes. I'm a principal analyst at S&P Global Market Intelligence. I cover Edge Infrastructure and Services. Joining me today is Bill Pfeifer, Edge Messaging and Thought Leadership Director at Dell Technologies. So thanks for joining me, Bill.
Thanks, Tiny. It's great to be here.
Today we're going to talk about building a sustainable edge strategy. And the first question is, well, what's brought us here, Bill? I mean, I know we've been talking about this quite a lot. What sort of thing made you want us to have this conversation?
So sort of the genesis of this conversation was I was thinking about sustainability, right? It's a huge topic in the US, but especially internationally. And as we talk about the edge, I'm hearing people discuss data's moving out of the data center to the edge. Workloads are moving out of the data center and cloud to the edge, but they're not moving, right? The whole idea of the edge is all of this new data is being created out at the edge. So all the stuff that's in data centers and clouds is there for a reason. It's going to stay there, right? We're not moving email out to the edge. We're not moving your quarterly financial reporting out to the edge. That's all going to stay where it was. All that data is still going to exist and continue to grow. But the edge is creating so much net new data, all this video, all these sensors, all of this experiential stuff that's out in the world, that it's a whole new movement, because even with how much we have in data centers and clouds, the edge is going to add a significant portion to that. So we have this massive data created out there. And we're hearing maybe we should just move that to data centers and clouds to process. But that moving comes at a cost. Or we deploy edge hardware out there. So we're going to manufacture and deploy and run all of this stuff out where we don't have the carbon capture and the monitoring and the efficient power and all that stuff. All of the goodness, the sustainability story that we've built into data centers and clouds. And so this sounds kind of like a really bad sustainability story so far. And it kind of made me wonder, right? Like, what's the good part about this? How is this not just destroying the world? And how do we understand this in a way that's more complex, that's more nuanced? There's got to be more to this story, right? A lot of the story that I'm hearing is just because it's new hardware and that's more efficient, which is fantastic, right? Intel and the other chip manufacturers have been doing just wonderful stuff, getting the energy intensity of compute down and building more and more efficient chips so that we can continue to throw more data and throw more compute use cases at the compute within the same power envelope, which is fantastic. But again, all of this new stuff is going to be out there somewhere, somehow. And there has to be, it seems like there's much more interesting sustainability story than what I've been hearing so far.
So in fact, really, there's those two conversations we had here. There's the first one, which is more deploy at the edge, where you're putting infrastructure into an edge environment for various reasons. It might be low latency for network, might be data residency, connecting into production systems which are not going to move out of a factory environment or a high sensitive environment. And then you've got the idea of using at the edge, and that's what the edge itself can bring insofar as efficiencies of business process and making sure that you've got more handles on exactly what you want to do for maintenance, for building management and those sort of things. And to your point about data, I mean, we've worked on a paper together, and some of the key findings here, first of all, data is going to grow 80% compound annual growth rate through 2027. So there's a huge explosion in data, and a lot of that's going to be coming from the edge itself. And I think it's about 62% of data volume and 68% of power is going to come from on-premise or nearby. So thinking about the co-location data centers in the metropolitan area or actually in your facility. So really got to think about how you're going to manage that a bit further.
So along with that, as we were exploring this, we came across some conversations about data centers and clouds, right? And it turns out that in addition to the regular cooling that you think about, they do a lot of water-based cooling, which I did not know. And this is, in some cases, we're using like 20% or more of the available water supply to cool major data centers, which is just mind-blowing. And so we've got so much heat concentrated just in one space that becomes a problem. We've got areas that won't let you build new data centers because the electrical grid is stressed, because there's so much power concentrated in one space, right? And so even just distributing that heat generation and trying to find interesting things to do with that, starting to explore, is there some benefit that we could get from the heat distribution? Or even with the edge, can you start to locate some of your workloads in spaces where there's more sustainable power, or dynamically allocate your workloads over to places where there's more stable power, cleaner power, more sustainable power, somehow, optimize that, and starting to look into some of those factors, right?
Yeah, and I've had conversations with various organizations who are talking a lot more about grey water, so rainwater and that sort of thing. So rather than taking the potable supply of water, then looking to recycle as much as possible. But that's really not going to be accessible in arid countries. The advantage in arid countries where you've got lots of sun, well, that's great for generating that power. But then you'll have the exactly same problem with the water, is that the restriction in water availability. So you just need to have that sort of balance.
Right, right. And we've seen some interesting things with, for instance, there's a public pool in the UK that's heated using waste heat from a micro data center. It's like a rack or two of equipment, and that's enough to heat a pool. So they basically get free energy for the data center. They lease out the compute space, and they heat their pool, which is kind of fantastic, right? So rather than using all these resources to get rid of the heat, we're using it in a productive way because it's not centralized like that. So there are some movements afoot toward, can we heat some homes using distributed heat like that, either pulled out of data centers and clouds, or just start to put edge compute out, in the basements of buildings and let that heat just passively rise, or then vent it when it's too hot, things like that. So it becomes a really interesting conversation and adds more depth to what we can do just by having the edge, right? And that's again just the build the edge conversation, in addition to that use the edge conversation, which there's a coming revolution in the energy industry about how we can use so much more sustainable power and generate power more efficiently, transmit power more efficiently. There are smart buildings that use power more efficiently, and water, smart cities that are just rethinking the whole living experience, and how technology can make citizens healthier and happier and safer while using less power, less water, all that. So the build the edge and run the edge conversations also tie into that sustainability piece, right? Just having the edge. And again, with all of the data being created out there, moving that data to a central location, I was shocked to see how much power is required to move that data. The telecommunications industry globally uses either slightly more than or slightly less than, depending on which study you see, slightly more or slightly less power than the total power consumed by all data centers, which is amazing to me. Now that's, phone conversations between people and people surfing YouTube and things like that, as well as moving data from place to place. But it's largely enterprise data that's using the bulk of that bandwidth. And so if we all of a sudden create this massive data and try to jam that into the telecom networks, then we have to expand them. And if we move that to data centers and clouds, then we have to expand them. Or we don't do that and we compute it on-prem, which that offset starts to become an interesting conversation as well.
Yeah, and thinking about some of the applications which are moving out there. I mean, AI, everyone's talking about generative AI at the moment. But what we're seeing is the idea of the AI models. You've got the training module, you've got the inference module, and you've also got data collection. So a lot of this stuff can happen in the cloud in the training, but the inference will actually happen out in the edge because it's lower latency, it's highly available, and the OT manager, operational technology manager, has more control over it. And if they are using this as part of their business process, the last thing they want to do is put it into a network which might fall over, or there's added risk to disconnection. So we'll see more and more AI inference models happening at the edge. Now, obviously with those AI chips, normal chips, but you need to accelerate them. The GPUs now are billowing out heat and require lots of power. And you're going away from a 12 kilowatt rack to 40, 60 kilowatts of rack. So that's obviously going to have an impact as well on the conversation.
All right. Again, except where we can distribute that inferencing load. And in a lot of cases, we can build some acceleration into just a basic processor so that the general purpose processor is capable of doing inferencing load. In some cases, we need to add specialized chips to accelerate that. But the more we can distribute that, the less we have these massive heat sinks that we have to deal with and power sinks that we have to deal with. Plus, then you're putting it closer to the data, so you get the faster response times. So I think the edge is going to be really a business decision first and foremost, right? You're generating this data for a reason. You need to be able to monetize it and drive that value into your business somehow. But sustainability is becoming more and more of a factor as we move forward. And so I think it's important to continue developing these ideas and learning more about where is that break point of process it in place versus backhaul it to a data center or cloud. For centralized processing, you've got growth either way and some costing, and it's just different conversations. But I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation as we move forward and seeing what we have to learn and how we can do all of this, handle all of this massive edge data growth more responsibly, more sustainably.
Well, we could talk about this for ages, Bill, but great, fascinating conversation to start off with. We are publishing a paper entitled Building a Sustainable Enterprise Edge, which I encourage everyone to have a look at. Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
It's been wonderful for me as well, Tiny. Thanks so much for the time and the focus. For anyone who wants to learn more about the edge, you can find more at delltechnologies.com/edge. Or if you want to continue this conversation, DM or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Bill Pfeifer, and I'd be happy to continue the conversation or point you to new assets as they come out.
And on the 451 point of view, we are continually updating our edge coverage, and you can find that at 451research.com. Many thanks indeed for spending your time together, and I wish you a pleasant day.